Welcome to the Fit Girl Magic podcast. If you are ready to find your inner magic, develop great habits, and a rock steady mindset to feel confident, comfortable, and fit in your body, you are in the right place. I am Kim Barnes Jefferson, and I'll be giving you weekly doses of health, fitness, and life tips sprinkled with humor and real talk. If you're ready to be consistent without the stress of perfection, magic makers, it's time to slip into your favorite pair of PJs, grab some coffee, kick back, and listen to today's show.
Hey, Magic Makers. Today we're doing something a little bit different. And honestly, it's a little bit overdue. Because if you're in your 40s and 50s and thinking, why does my body feel like it missed a software update? You are not imagining things. The workouts that we used to do, they don't work anymore. Eating clean just feels just downright exhausting. And tracking calories, girl, I got a full-time job and I don't need to apply for another one. And here's the thing no one really says out loud. This is not a willpower, discipline, or just try a little bit harder. It's all about how health actually works in our real life. So today I'm talking with Emily Kaplan. She's an investigative journalist turned metabolic health powerhouse and co-founder of MetFix and the Broken Science Initiative. We're talking all about why the gym might be the front lines for healthcare and why doctors only get about 12 minutes with us and why trainers end up hearing the real story because we're with you more of the time. And we are, with this initiative that she's worked on, we can really help dig into insulin challenges, hormones, midlife metabolism, food confusion, and why moving more just doesn't do it anymore. It's so outdated and how education and not perfection is the real game changer. So this is one of those conversations that'll make you be like, oh yeah, that explains a lot. So let's get into it. All right. I want to thank Miss Clara B. Lee from the Philippines. I've gone international, y'all. She leaves a great review here for me. She says so many valuable health tips that you can learn from. It is a must listen. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. Again, I appreciate every single review that comes my way. It tells me that I'm giving you the information that you're looking for, the information that you're yearning for. I know that when I was in my, perimenopausal journey, I just was like, where can I turn to? What information can I find? And I'm grateful that I am giving that to you. These reviews mean the world to me. They light me up that I'm able to help you in any way possible. So if you are listening to this, do me a favor, head over to iTunes and leave me a review. If you're like, girl, I don't know how to do that, reach out to me. I will help you get that done. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the show. All right, Magic Makers, I'm doing something a little bit different. I really liked always talking to different facets of health, right? We all talk about training and weight loss and all that stuff, but I feel like we all know that when we hit our 40s, 50s, and so forth, our bodies were just like, what is happening? And then you're like, what is happening? Because we know the workouts that used to work, they don't do that anymore. And eating clean ain't about that anymore. And tracking every calorie, who's got time for that? But here's where we're talking about, Emily Kaplan. She's the co-founder of the Broken Science Initiative, and she's also the co-founder of MetFix. And we just are going to really have a conversation of just like, what is the evolution of health? Especially we both came from the personal training space. And we've just seen that it's less about telling your client how many bicep curls to do and see you in 2 days. It's really about what is going on in our whole life. Because we all know someone who has some type of lifestyle-related disease, lifestyle-related condition, whatever you want to call it. And how, as a trainer, we are, kind of at the forefront of that because we hear more of the conversations than you talk to your primary care physician, and you don't have to wait 6 months to get into us. So, Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I feel like you just absolutely perfectly sort of summed up why we launched MetFix because I mean, Greg Glassman is my business partner, and he really did recognize when he was running CrossFit that coaches, trainers have access to people who need their help 3 to 5 times a week, whereas a doctor, the average US doctor sees patients for 12 minutes. And about half of that they spend on their computer trying to figure out like how to code the right insurance code, right? So they're not even listening to you anymore.
Right.
And it's
They're
not
clicking and scrolling,
right?
and you're like, hi.
Right. Right. Hello. Like, did you even hear what I said? I actually in college was really interested in communication stuff, and I studied history, but also psychology. And there was this really interesting study that was looking at doctor-patient relationships that I still refer to all the time, because it basically was saying, like, when you're feeling really vulnerable and you go to the doctor, you are just automatically going to list your least significant symptoms first, right? Because you're sort of like, I might be dying, but I'm going to start with like, I have a headache, right?
If you are already tired of January, this is for you. I am hosting the Doable 26. It's not a reset. It's not a diet. It's not about pretending that you're going to start a different life this year. You'll get 26 small, boring, wildly effective, healthy habits right away so that you can see the full picture. Then starting on February 1st, you can follow along day by day and work at a pace that actually fits your real life. We're not trying to do 26 things in a day. We're not about perfection, not about checking all the boxes. This is just enough structure to help you to stop starting over and over again. If you want the full list, do me a favor. The link to the Doable 26, that is in the show notes. It's totally free. So come join us.
The doctor only listens to the first few symptoms you say, because after they hear those, they start trying to match it to like what prescription they can give you, what to code it, all the back end stuff that's going on in their head. So there's this like complete communication mismatch that happens in the doctor's office where you're like, okay, I'm going to get to the really bad stuff in a couple minutes. And they're already done. They're not listening anymore.
Right.
So whereas with coaches, like you're hanging out, you're talking, everybody's sort of sharing, whether it's like, if it's one-on-one, especially, like you're sharing lots of personal information and really building a bond of trust. And so personal trainers are in like unique position to deliver health through that relationship and through their interests, right? So, I mean, I think we all know people who are like, oh, I love to work out, I should be a trainer. Like those aren't our people. Right? Like people are people who have been at this for a really long time, who are constantly trying to work on their continuing education, who really want to understand, like, how do I drive the biggest health impacts in my community? And I think like we have, Medfix affiliates, we have about 100 of them in the United States already. And I really think they're places where like health is created in a gym environment. And we have a medical society too under Broken Science. And that's about 50% patients, 50% doctors. So it's not really just medical. It's patients who are really looking for good research and more access, to sort of the real information of like what's going on and what's driving these things and how do I read scientific literature. But what's interesting is that Netflix and the Broken Science Initiative's Medical Society have access to our resource library, which has like tons of medical research. And then about twice a month, we have the sort of like world experts on metabolic health, whether they be like doctors, researchers, or really famous authors, come on in a private group Zoom call where anybody can ask them questions. So you can read their book or you can read the study, and then you can go on and really learn from the first, like, because I used to be an investigative journalist. And for me, it's really, really essential to know your sourcing, right? And so like all these different things, you kind of have to know where you're getting your information and what is their bias or what is their funding source. And so I think for us, both the affiliate owners and the medical society getting access directly. So like these people usually give a presentation and then they open it up to questions. So, I mean, you have like people who have written these like New York Times best-selling books and they're available on a call. And sometimes it's only like 15, 20 people. So it's like really a cool experience for them. But the Medfix gyms themselves, and so we have about 12 doctors that have opened Medfix gyms in their medical practices.
Oh, wow.
Because they've recognized just what you said, which is that like the trainer is going to be able to, I go to the doctor and they're like, hey, you really got to lose 20 pounds. You're pre-diabetic. This is getting serious. And then you leave and you don't see them again. Like they're not doing their job, right? Like they want to. So it's not like it's not a negative thing against them. Like the system has really shifted where the doctors aren't able to provide preventative care the way they would like to, or even treatment care, right? And so I think the main goal with Medfix is to elevate the personal trainer to the role of healthcare provider by giving them this higher level of education. So we have a 2-day course we call Foundations, and you go in and you really learn on a biological level how the food you eat gets transferred into energy in the body, which either leads to health or leads to disease. And the reason for that is because I felt like all of these coaches that I know, all the people I know in the larger community really want to drive health, but you can't actually do that with exercise alone.
Right.
And so we have all these professional athletes now. I mean, I get a lot of hate online for saying like, carbs and sugar are bad. I don't care how ripped you are. Like, it doesn't matter how tight your body is. Your body is not designed to have high levels of insulin chronically. So anything you do to raise your insulin levels is going to drive disease, and it drives all the chronic diseases.
Right,
It's
right.
type 2 diabetes. So by giving coaches really in-depth biological knowledge over 2 days, and we get into mitochondria, we get into insulin, we get into behavior change. So how do I take all the science information and really apply it with my clients? It really allows people to cut through all the garbage. So you read something about how like eggs are bad, and you're like, well, that doesn't biologically make sense because eggs aren't
Right.
good for my insulin, right? And so then you can start being a better critical thinker out in the world, right? So, I mean, I just did this sort of like little promo video for us because I was like, you know what? Like, I'm in Boston. I know tons of moms who take their kids to the park and feed them like organic sugar Slurpees, and
Right,
you're like,
right.
no, like, you don't understand. It's not your fault. Again, it's just like the doctors. You're trying to do right by your kid. So you think organic's okay. But like the American Academy of Pediatrics says kids should have 23 grams of sugar a day, right? All day, total. And like you just gave little Johnny 24 grams of sugar
Right.
Slurpee, like like some little organic green pouch. Like it's all education. Like we just need to go back to some basics so that we're not so easily fooled.
And
And I think we've been really fooled. And
agreed. I mean, especially the organic, right? The food industry has been, know the keywords, right? If I put whole grain, if I put organic, if I put natural, the buzzwords that like I pick up the package and I'm like, oh yeah, and I throw it in the cart and I don't flip it over and realize that like the only thing organic in there is the one lone apple slice that I threw in there, and everything else is, whatever that they put into it. But what I really like and I want to unpack here is that you're right. I was a trainer for 10 years, and the conversations I have with people were not what the traditional certification programs told you, right? They made me feel like I was just going to talk about bicep curls, and I was just going to design programs, and they were going to leave and they were going to come back on Tuesday. No one ever told me that I was going to have a conversation with Emily about stress, or how does she get herself here, or how does she deal with not sleeping? Like those things never were part of my certification.
And actually, just to let you know, so this goes into the investigative reporting stuff, the ACSM and the NSCA, which are, other than CrossFit, two of the biggest certification outlets in the world for personal trainers, they're funded almost entirely by Coke and Pepsi. So it's a nonprofit organization, and Greg actually got into a series of lawsuits with them. And through discovery, right? So you get all these legal documents, you're able to sort of see this pattern. And I think why people are like, what do Coke and Pepsi care about personal trainers? And it's because they're able to create this narrative that if you just move more, you can eat whatever you want. So those certifications won't touch nutrition. They're not allowed to.
Right.
And so their whole thing is that like, you're lazy. You need to eat more. And actually, that's total garbage. That is not biologically sound at all, but it serves the purpose of soda.
Right. It's interesting that you say that because, the way they position it is that our, I guess our edict is we are a fitness company. So therefore, we only touch on the surface level of nutrition. Your focus as a trainer is 100% movement.
Yeah, that's right. And that's by design, right? And so...
And now that you say that, you're like, oh, now I know why you haven't, like other companies, right? You started out as a fitness company, and then you saw the hole, and you're like, how do we fill this hole? Yeah. ACSM, it's been around, I don't know, 50 plus years. Like, there's clearly a hole. It's been growing for decades, and they're like, our lane.
Well, and so like this begs the question, right? Like if your job is to get people fit and you're only allowed to use movement, what do you do when someone's A1C is like 5.8? Right?
Agreed.
Are they fit? No, they're not. They're pre-diabetic. But that's out of your turf, but your job is to get them fit. So we've gotten to this place where we have more information. We know movement is great and it's hugely important for staying independent late into life. And we're not shying away from movement. We definitely believe movement is important, but it is not as important as nutrition.
Oh, 1,000%.
I think, the idea of sort of really creating a healthcare model in the gym, you have to have both.
Yeah.
And it has to be like, and so we have really cool affiliate owners who are doing what we call special populations classes.
Yeah.
Actually going out into their community. Because one of the things that we've learned is that if you're really overweight or you're already suffering from a chronic disease, the major mindset, which is so frustrating to me, but it is honest, people think they have to get in shape before they go to the gym.
Right.
Our special classes are basically, our owners are using some of our marketing tools or other things that we're helping support them with to go into their community and say, hey, look, we're going to run this type 2 diabetes class in our gym. It's going to be limited to 8 people. And the only other people who have type 2 diabetes. And our goal is to reverse that in the gym. And they're doing it. And so within 8 weeks, they're getting people off medication. And it's essentially this notion of saying, look, we're serving you. We know how to do this. But it does these magical things where then you get all these people together who are just used to going to the doctor to get more prescriptions.
Exactly.
And you have people who are reluctant, but then they see other people getting success. And so it's not a sales thing. It's like a watch and see, right? You're not sure this is legit. Follow these people who are in this group. And so we have another affiliate owner who's doing one for middle-aged women in strength, right? This is a big topic right now, but we've known forever that as your estrogen drops, your bones become more brittle. And women's risk of having osteoporosis and then having a fall and dying within a year is very serious. It's plainly scary. So being able to go out into your community and saying hey, are you a middle-aged woman? You've never lifted weights before. Come on in. We have a class just for you. So it's doing a couple of things. It's really helping to serve the local community in the ways that are part of our charter, but they're also building these little communities of people who are suffering from the same thing. And I believe really strongly that you have to find other healthy people, right? So it's really cool. I go on a diet program, but then I go out to hang out with my friends and they're all going to the same old restaurants we went to.
Right.
Same old things, drinking all night or whatever, right? And I'm sort of but if you meet people at the gym in your special class and you're all getting great results and you're feeling better and you're living a better life, now you're hanging out together. So it sort of solves for the community aspect. It solves for the health aspect. And it's really, it could make me cry. It makes me really emotional. It's not expensive, right? How much money are people spending on all these medications and the stress of dealing with your insurance? Forget all that, right? And that we're not giving medical advice, but we are endorsed by doctors who have, taken all of our classes and reviewed all our material to make sure it's sound. And we have so many doctors who are trying to find Metfix gyms in their area that they can send their patients to because they know they cannot do this with medication. So if Metfix were a drug, it would be the biggest multi-billion-dollar seller and it's not because it's just your gym membership, right?
Right.
So it's hugely effective and it's really all just education. It's just learning the right way that your body processes these things and what the reaction it causes. It's not inaccessible, right?
Right. So, for most of my listeners are the average gym goer, right? So it's as I'm listening to this, what separates Metfix from Globo Gym? Why would I seek this out?
I think there's a long answer and a short answer. The short answer is I would send my mother or my kids to a Metfix gym without going and checking it out first. We are not accepting everybody to be affiliates. I want the affiliates to really be the gold standard where you have a higher level of education and people who have been in this for a long time. This is not their first rodeo. So there's a higher level of practicing coaches.
Gotcha.
They have more experience and they have done this deep dive education that allows them to communicate better, right? All these issues that we have something called the Daily Fix, which is free. It's on our website, but anybody who becomes an affiliate is able to use it as a plugin. So it's hosted on their website and it's a daily recipe, a daily workout, and a daily reading so that your brain, your body, and your belly are all sort of evolving towards this healthier life.
Gotcha.
And the recipes are really easy. So you should be able to make them in 10 to 15 minutes. They're all really low carb, natural foods, the right macros to help you feel your insulin is stabilizing and you're feeling healthier and you have access to more energy. But we have all these people who I just love these messages that come through that are like, I'm cooking for the first time in 20 years. Because it's really, really hard. I mean,
it is
a lot about like seed oils and nobody really understands. But we explain all of that in our class. Like I have a little bit of like a trigger. When people say inflammation, I'm like, that just means you don't understand, right? Like, yes, there is inflammation, but why? You want to know why, right?
Right.
We get into reactive oxygen species in the class, which is basically a signaling molecule that tells the cell if it's full or not. So when we call it ROS, reactive oxygen species, is low, the cell feels it's empty. If you eat seed oils, that's what happens. So all these vegetable oils that are pervasive, you cannot get around them unless you are cooking. I mean, I was at a steak house a couple weeks ago and I said to them, I'm really sorry to bother you, but I'm trying to not eat seed oils. It was a fancy restaurant. Can you let me know if the steak has any seed oil? And the guy came back and he's like, yeah, it's actually marinated in canola oil. And I said, do you have any that you didn't treat that way? And he was like, yeah, let me ask. And so I was like, you can put as much butter on as you want.
Right.
And have the canola oil. And if you go to Whole Foods and you ask them, is there anything in your prepared food section that doesn't have canola oil? They will tell you no. It's cheaper and it doesn't congeal, right? So polyunsaturated fats are always liquid form. And it's because of the way that they're heated and treated. And what it does to the cell is it says, I'm hungry, keep eating more. So there are these chips that are really expensive. Potato chips are called Vandy's. I really should get a sponsorship deal from them because I talk about them, but I don't have any connection to them at all. But they're cooked in beef tallow. And I always say to people, like, if we explain like the electron transport train, we explain like all the mechanisms of action of how ROS interacts with the cell. But forget all that. Just get a bag of Doritos, get a bag of Vandy chips, and see how your body responds. You open the Doritos, you start eating, you
can't stop until the bag's gone. Yeah.
That's because the cell is saying, eat more, I'm not full. Eat 5 of these chips cooked in beef tallow and you're full. You don't want to eat anymore. So when you combine a high carb diet with a high seed oil diet, it's like a metabolic bomb. And it leads to the cell basically becoming so full, it can't hold anymore, but you're still shoveling more into the cell. So then what happens is the cell spills over. So you have amino acids that enter the bloodstream, which is really how we measure triglycerides, right? So you go to the doctor and they're measuring, do you have high or low triglycerides? And it's a warning sign of metabolic dysfunction if they're high. And so what ends up happening is those nutrients need to go somewhere. So they end up as fat in places we're not supposed to have fat, which we call ectopic fat, but it just basically means you have fat in your pancreas, you have fat in your liver, you have fat in your heart. That's from eating too much sugar. And it's from the seed oils saying, eat more, eat more, eat more. When you eat fat, saturated fats, your body feels full. It's really hard to overeat steak, right?
Yeah.
Really hard. And so I think just learning some of these things, which are not controversial. Anybody who's studying biology is like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. But we give this class to doctors and they're like, oh my God, I wish I had learned that. And I think, my kids have to take 2 years worth of puberty classes. That's cool. That's important.
Right.
It might be more beneficial for kids to actually learn, how does my food transfer this into disease or transfer it into energy that I can use and, sort of maintain health. So what I was starting to say before is there's even a lot of misnomers about athletes and the need for glucose. So this is get in trouble online and people get really nasty with me. But the truth is we have a ton of professional athletes now who have type 2 diabetes and they look ripped, but it's because your body cannot handle that level of insulin.
Yeah.
And even when you're working out, you're burning through the glucose. The rest of it is being stored. So I always like to say the most simple way to think of insulin is that it's a storage hormone.
Yep.
It's very, very important. It's not a bad thing. It's telling your body store this energy, store it for later. So it gives you a burst of energy and then it locks the rest away.
Yeah.
So when we see people who are really overweight, we have this really negative impression oh, she's eating too much. She could afford to skip a few meals. She needs to move more. Really, that person is internally starving. They have all this fat on their body they cannot access as energy because their insulin's high. So there's something called lipolysis, which we also explain, which is basically that when the insulin is high, you're in storage mode and everything's locked away. You have to lower the insulin in order for your body to have access to the energy on your body in the fat stores. So if you go on a ketogenic diet where you're not consuming carbohydrates and your insulin is low, when I had 3 gyms, and the women in my gyms would always be like, Emily, like, I feel great. I have all this energy. I'm losing all this weight, but I'm bored. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? You're bored. And they'd say, like, I have no interest in eating anymore. And I'm like, that's because your body is eating the fat that's in the reserves that it couldn't access before. So like, you got to find a new hobby, right? Like, sorry to tell you, but like, you were spending a tremendous amount of your energy feeling really tired and really hungry because you were stuck in this chronically high insulin state. You're not in that anymore. Your body doesn't need as much outside food. So we really also try to demystify this idea of like calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
Which really fits the old narrative, right? And so it's like, again, it's this notion of like, well, you just have to measure how many calories you're eating, and then you have to burn a certain amount in order to stay in balance. And people will say like, oh, it's the first law of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics, yes, but the second law of thermodynamics is there's no causality.
Right,
So
right.
what we're doing is we're saying you're taking in more than you're letting out, but we're not saying why. It doesn't actually, like, we don't have calorie receptors in our body. We have insulin receptors. We have estrogen receptors in all of our organs if you're a woman. That's hugely important in terms of driving fat storage, driving energy, all of those things. It's not about the calories. And so like when people say that, I'm always like, do you think if I ate the same number of calories in Twinkies as I did in steak that my body is responding the same way? I mean, this is on a very basic level, doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. It's funny that it's interesting you say that, because as most of the women who are listening to this podcast, they're in that midlife space. And just as you said, making this number up, guys, if they're eating, say, 1,000 calories, because, I don't like to do math. So if they're eating like 1,000 calories, and if it was 1,000 calories of Twinkies versus 1,000 calories of broccoli, your body processes that very differently. And you might not immediately see the 1,000 calories of Twinkies, but long term, as you mentioned, like there's internal stuff that isn't able to process because a Twinkie has zero nutrients in it compared to what 1,000 calories of broccoli would be able to bring to the party.
And this is where athletes get really, I mean, I my heart goes out to them too, where they think like, I can consume all of this sugar and I need it because I need the glucose to run. And it's like, no, you are damaging your system over time. I mean, I always like to give the example of kids, right? Because people will be like, well, my kid can eat anything.
Well, yeah.
They
for
can
for now.
For now. But you're damaging their system in ways that they will, and when we see this, right? So like the CDC just released these numbers saying that 1/3 of kids 14 to 18 are pre-diabetic in the United States. But the bigger number for me that's so upsetting is there's something called non-alcoholic fatty liver. And they just said that 1 in 10 kids in America has that. So 1 in 10 kids in the United States has a liver that looks like a raging alcoholic. And we're all okay with this.
Yeah.
Like it makes me so angry, right? And it's like those parents, they're doing what they were told. They're feeding their kids in those proportions. And they're measuring calories. It's
and if you go back to the athlete, when you and I were kids, you went to maybe like 2, maybe 3 days of some type of sport, right? But you only played one sport. You didn't play 500 sports, and we're not like all day long tournaments on weekends. You played 1 or 2 sports, and maybe a mom brought apple slices or orange slices at the end of the game. Yeah. Now you see these kids and they have like a whole suitcase of snacks to get them through a 40-minute game. Yeah. And you're like on top of the Gatorade and all the other things. And you're just like, you're saying to yourself, you're like, how did we survive on like orange slices at the end of the game?
Yeah.
And I think we just had plain water. I don't even really remember drinking while I was playing a sport when I was a kid.
No, I don't even think we had water. I think it was like if you were thirsty, drink, right? But like, right? And like we had those Gatorade tubs, but they were filled with water. They weren't filled with Gatorade, right? Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the things that I'm like acutely aware of and upset about is the public school food. Because like, like I said before, the American Academy of Pediatrics says 23 grams of sugar a day. And I went to my daughter's school last year for breakfast and they were serving cinnamon buns the size of the kindergartners' heads.
Yep.
Right. And like they had all this sugar cereal out. I mean, they were easily serving the kids 100 grams of sugar before they sat down in their seats. And then everyone's like, oh, they need ADHD medication. They need anxiety medication. And I'm like, wait a minute, do they? Or did you just give them 3 days worth of sugar? and then tell them to sit still and focus.
Right.
That's not right. It's so profoundly, obviously wrong what we're feeding them in school. And I talked to the school principal about it, and she basically was like, I totally agree with you, that the government delivers the food. And like, we have to put it out. And so like, I don't have any control over, like, I can't just say like, oh, we're not taking any more Frosted Flakes. Like, it's not how it works. It's a systemic problem.
No,
and even like trying to make your own, like, because the other thing for me was like, my kids were raised pretty low sugar because obviously we know all this stuff. But like, then we go into an environment where like, we're not around. And so like, you're putting all these little kids, a sugar buffet with no parents in sight, and you think they're all going to like do what's right.
Right. They're all, I'm going to pick the cinnamon roll or the apple. Like, dude, they're not going to pick the apple. Let's be honest. Like, I can get an apple at home.
And if you pack their lunch, like, they're not going to eat it because they're going to go for the pizza and the other stuff. Right. And so it's wild to me to think like, we're basically putting them in like this all you can eat sugar buffet. And the responsibility falls on the 7-year-old to make the right choices. Like, insanity.
But, let's not even take the 7-year-old. I'm a 37-year-old. I'm a 47-year-old. Like, am I going to pick the apple or the cinnamon roll? Right? We're still wired in that same kind of like vein. Or, if you're so programmed as that 47-year-old, you're like, oh my God, that's bad. So that makes me bad. Or so it's like,
Yeah, and I think like part of what I really hope that we're able to do a better job of on the education side is demystifying this notion of like, shame, right? Like, I really do think like most Americans are exhausted by 4 p.m. They are missing half of their adult life, right? If you get home at 5 o'clock and you're too tired to like play with your kids or meet up with friends or go for a walk, you are missing half of your life because of your food choices, right? Yeah. You're having a massive insulin crash. And you are really, really tired. That's not a fallacy. Like, that is energetically what is happening inside your body. And the same is true for like, if you're in this high insulin state, you are craving sugar like mad. And people are like, oh, it's addictive. Well, yeah, it's the body is driving the mind, because if you eat that sugar, you're going to get a burst of energy. And that's what your body thinks it needs right now.
Right.
Once you become fat adapted, once you cut out carbs and you're able to access the fat on your body, you don't have those ups and downs. And you have way more energy because you have all this stored fat on your body, even if you're lean. And so the body is optimally processing in a totally different way. So, I think like, on a like sort of darker level, like we're stuck in this food paradigm where we're eating food that's making us fat and sick and exhausted. We've all sort of just accepted it. Like, we've just sort of accepted like, oh, well, everybody I know is like this.
Right.
I was talking to a friend of mine who has type 2 diabetes and, grew up in Boston. And he was saying like, I feel like this is just like, I always thought it was genetic that I would get type 2 diabetes because everybody in my family has it. And now that I've learned all this information from you guys, I'm realizing, no, it's just that my mom ate the same food I did.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not genetic. It's actually like the environment and what you know and what you're feeding. And you're all eating the same thing at home.
And it's true. Like, you only know what you know, right? And so it's like, then as the thing I like that you're bringing to here is that all of us hear all the things online, this is good, this is bad. And, then it flips back and you don't really know which way. So I really like that MetaFit is helping us as trainers understand the information that our clients are bringing to us, but also the information that we are seeing ourselves, and how do we make sure that we steer the narrative so that people aren't falling to, there's a guy on TikTok or Instagram that's always in the grocery store and is like, this sucks, this is good. And you're just like, but that's my favorite brand. Like, does it really suck? Yeah. Or are you like, where's that information coming from?
I think like a lot of the other training programs or like fitness concepts out there are really good at doing that. I don't want to do that. I want to explain to you why. Because once you understand why, then you don't need to ask me every time you go to the store, which is bad, because you understand the body better. And so you can think more about like, I think that's what real education is, right? Like, you can learn a bunch of facts. How do you apply them becomes, well, do you understand why those facts are facts? And if you don't, then you're really easy to manipulate.
Yeah. And that's what I like about it, because like, I know for me, a lot of my clients have the why, right? And I think I've also been very good about instituting like, just stop. Like, I grew up in when it was all about no pain, no gain. And it was like no fat and you just avoided foods always. And I'm always like, now you have to ask yourself these questions because a lot of it was driven, as you mentioned earlier, by food groups that, certain food lobbies were like, we want you to eat more of blah. And so like, think about milk, right? That was the whole milk campaign for forever. And you're like, my favorite star has a milk mustache. I should drink milk too, right? So it was just like we all kind of got brainwashed into like milk is fabulous for us. Like, I'm not saying nothing's wrong with milk, but I'm saying some people don't feel good on milk. The end. Bottom line, do not cross go. And so I always say to people, like, how does that food make you feel, right? Like instead of blindly cutting something out, if it makes, like gluten, if gluten makes you feel like trash, get rid of the gluten.
That's why I love things like the Whole30. Because it's like, and I think I used to have people do this when I had my gyms, and like people would always like kind of mess it up at the end, which is really the most important part. So like for people who don't know,
yes,
like you take out all these foods for 30 days and you sort of see how your body adapts to that. And then how do you feel as you the idea is to slowly reintroduce them. So like you're supposed to introduce, like if you're really doing it technically, you're supposed to introduce like one new food group a week. So like you reintroduce dairy and nothing else. And you see how does that bring back tummy aches, right? Because a lot of times we feel better, but we don't even notice that we really feel.
We don't know why we feel better.
And so when you slowly reintroduce those things, you can start to say, oh, wow, this is the thing that's making me feel sick or tired or grumpy or whatever. And I feel like everybody does the opposite. They're like, I did 30 days of clean eating. I'm like, I'm going out, I'm having my favorite meal. And you're like, no, go slow, because the point is to re-educate you on how your body responds. And I think especially middle-aged women, I mean, we have a women's health online class that I've been working on with our team for the last year, because I had a podcast that was called Empowered Health that was looking at sex differences in medicine, and then a column in Boston Magazine, actually, that was looking at the same thing the podcast was doing, because I had realized that women's bodies were totally different. And yet, like, from 1977 to 1993, we were not included in clinical trials. And so there's a huge, sort of medical literature gap, right? So the example I always like to give is aspirin, which people tout as like the best trial. So it was like doubly blind, placebo, randomized, all of the things you would want. There was not a single woman in that trial. So when people say like, oh, we know this about aspirin, they did not do any testing on women. So like maybe not, right? But we know our brains are different. We know our lungs are different. We know our hearts are different. And we know that we have that hormonal regulation is really, the endocrine system is what dictates health, right? So just as I'm talking about insulin being a hormone, so is progesterone. So is, testosterone is huge. It's our dominant hormone. We don't have as much as men. But women are like, I don't have testosterone. And I'm like, you have more testosterone than you have anything else. Right. And yet, like, there's some blood lab companies that won't even do free testosterone, which is what you really want to know as you're aging, on women. So doctors have to order it as if you're a man, and then they have to recalibrate on their own, whether that's high or low. And because none of us ever had any of this hormone testing when we were actually like young and functional, right? What you really want to know is how much are you declining. So I always say to women, like, go get a hormone panel like in your 20s. Nothing's going to be wrong, right? You're probably going to be great. But just so you have a baseline, because you want to know, like, who was I and how has it changed? That's the information you need, not where do I fall in the standard deviation of other women who are getting their testosterone checked for the first time in their lives, right?
Right. Because it's, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of the women I talk to, I'm always like, if hindsight is always 20/20, and I can look back into my 20s and I never had a regular period, and never in my 20s did my doctor ever say, you know what, we should check your hormones. Yeah. Because, hindsight is like, I was always very estrogen dominant. Now I know why I was. And so all we had to do was either put me on an estrogen blocker or give me some more progesterone. But we didn't do, like, here is a birth control pill. And of course, the education I had was zero when it came to that, other than like, sex ed was all about have sex, you get pregnant. That was it. And here are the three hormones, the end. Like
It's that, right?
Right. There was no, like, they could get out of whack. None of that.
Yeah.
And then, now you're like, okay, so I shouldn't have been just given the pill. I should have had some type of like, what's actually going on underneath the hood that's causing someone who's in their 20s not to get their period for like 6 months at a time.
Yeah. I did a series on endometriosis, and it was really interesting. Like there's so much that is just like, I mean, women are treated with like, SSRIs, like depression medication.
Yes.
For endometriosis, it's basically like you have epithelial tissue from your uterus and all other parts of your body. So like when you have your period, it like almost is like a back flush, but they don't know why. They don't know why some people have it really severely, like in incredible pain. And I had a doctor say to me, like, this is the only time where a patient presents pain and the doctor's response is, honey, it's normal.
Right.
Pain, always an
Take a few Advil.
Right. No, and like, I mean, some of these girls suffer to the point where they can't go to school.
Yeah.
They're being told, like, just suck it up. Like that feels like medical malpractice to me. It makes me so angry. But one of the things that I did learn when we were looking at that is that things like soy are really bad for people who are estrogen sensitive, right? So it has estrogen in it. I don't really understand all the mechanisms, but that there were some doctors who were having huge success with women by getting them off of soy. And I know that from, especially all the stuff that we're putting into this women's health class, because I got so frustrated with all of these like online perimenopausal experts who like they're saying like, eat more carbs and exercise less as you go through perimenopause. And I'm like, you become insulin sensitive when you go through menopause. Like your estrogen and your progesterone and your insulin regulation you cannot separate them. So when women are like, oh, I'm gaining weight and I'm doing the same thing I've always done, it's because you can't handle the same load of carbs.
Right.
And like a lot of women, I mean, and I've experimented a little bit with carnivore. It's hard for me to stay on it. But I know like people who are on that, like don't get the hot flashes. They don't and it's because their insulin isn't, basically shocking the whole system every time. So it's like all of this stuff is, and there's research to back all of this up, but it's not great, right? Because it's really new. And so I think like this is an environment where women are really good at joining forces with each other and saying like, hey, this is what I've seen. How have you tried this? What
right.
worked? You, right? I mean, I think that because we've been left out of the medical establishment for so long, there is a lot of networking and ways we support each other that's hugely important. And I think part of what I'm hoping we do, I mean, we're doing this with a lot of the tech that we're building out on the back end of Metfix, is allowing individuals and our affiliates to be doing these sort of like special populations classes and then sharing their data so that our doctors can then take it and go publish it. Because a lot of this isn't going to get funded because it's like we're not suggesting that you go on more medication.
Right.
And not really selling you anything other than health, right? So through education, you can pay a coach and they can help you. And that's it. And so I'm like, really, like we get a lot of people coming to us and offering to do like partnership deals or sponsorships. And my whole thing is like, look, if you want to offer me 20% of, a discount on a product, and we give 10 to the affiliates and then we make 10 off of it, I've said, no, I want you to just give that full 20 to the affiliates so that I'm not involved. And if you like the product, great, your choice, but I'm not benefiting if you buy it or you don't, so that I'm not in a position where we're pushing products on people, because I think that gets really tricky in terms of people. But it also allows our affiliates to get better discounts than anybody in the marketplace, because all the other businesses are determined to take some piece of that pie. And I'm like, just pass it on to the affiliates. So we have kind of insane deals for people who are our affiliate owners, because we're not taking a cut of it, because I don't want to be in the business of endorsing things and not knowing enough about them. And I don't have the time to really investigate every product and know what it's worth. But I think like that's your job. You know what I mean? Like you can look at something and decide like, yeah, this is really cool. I'd like to buy it. And I can buy it at a discount because I'm a Metfix affiliate. It's cool. And then if you don't, I'm not suffering either.
And so, how does, for the person who is just the layman, who would potentially go to a Metfix, how does Metfix provide a practical solution for, the midlife woman?
So, I mean, I think there are a couple of things. So like our online classes, so like this women's health class, are really inexpensive. So we have one now that's on type 2 diabetes and it's $150. So, and that's open to anybody. That's not just for coaches. And so like we have a lot of parents who, your kid gets diagnosed and you're hearing one thing from a doctor in a very short appointment and you want to learn more. It's very involved. So it like goes through the whole history of type 2 diabetes so that you can see that before the introduction of insulin, the low carb diet was the preferred treatment for type 2 diabetes. And then basically we introduced insulin and we were like, oh, okay, you can eat whatever you want. You just have to take insulin. And my feeling about that is like, that's sort of like a kid with a peanut allergy.
Right.
we say like, go ahead and have the Reese's peanut butter cup. Just give yourself the EpiPen. Like we would never do that. That's like crazy, right? But that is how we treat type 2 diabetics. And then, things like the American Diabetes Association, like their charter doesn't say reverse diabetes. It says to help patients better manage the disease.
Right.
And the largest type 2 diabetes trial ever done was done by this company called Virta. And they basically do telehealth where they help you reverse your type 2 diabetes and get off your medications by prescribing the ketogenic diet. So like that class really, I think is exceptional, especially, other online classes are thousands of dollars that go into that much detail. And it took us about a year to put it together, but it's $150 because like the goal is to like actually get the information to people. And I think it allows you to have a much better conversation with your doctor if you're going through something like that. You're now really informed and it's backed with tons of research for you to print out, whatever you want to do. So we have these online classes. The women's health class is going to be just like that type 2 diabetes class, but even more involved in some levels, because I think there is a basic level of education that women are just not given about how hormones regulate their health and how those hormones really start changing in your 30s. So it's even earlier than people, sort of wanted to acknowledge a couple years ago, and both like what you can do about it, but also like all this notion of hormone replacement therapy. So for Broken Science, which is really looking at like problems in modern medicine and statistical tools and corruption and sort of like a higher level of how did we get here, right? For that, I have a lot of like YouTube videos that I did a little while ago that look at medical testing and statistical testing and break it down for the average person so that when you hear these things, you can start to suss up like, what does that actually mean? And the thing with the Women's Health Initiative, which is where all these guidelines came out saying that, if you take hormone replacement therapy, you're at a high risk for developing cancer. That's a really classic example of relative risk versus absolute risk.
Yeah.
It was they were reporting relative risk, which is basically out of thousands of women, and I'm not going to get the number right, but let's say that it went from 4 women to 8 women developed cancer who were on hormone replacement therapy out of thousands. So the absolute risk was nothing. The relative risk seemed high. And for some reason, that's like what everybody reported on.
Yeah, they glommed onto that one little like number.
And it's not like, I think even now I see online all the time, like people are like, oh, they've gone back and retested it. And it's like, no, they didn't. We just looked at the data. I was reporting on this 15 years ago. Like they reported the wrong figure. They reported relative risk when what you want to know is absolute risk. And you see this all the time with like, whenever I see a headline that says like, your risk is, 200% increases, that's relative risk. It's almost statistically impossible that they would find something that your risk would go up 200% by. So like whenever you see that, you should have a little sort of alert in your head that's like, they're not reporting the absolute risk, which is the total population risk, right? That's what you want to know. So we've known for a long time, looking at that study, that the hormone replacement therapy is not going to cause cancer at the rates that they were saying it was. And then you have to weigh things like your mental health, bone health, which is huge, like wasting of muscle. That all happens because our estrogen drops so low, right? And our body is going through this shock. And so, again, like your brain is an energy system. And if you're not feeding it properly and you become more sensitive to insulin, you need to understand that that is causing brain fog. And so there's a lot of education that will be put in there. And most of our coaches will take those online classes. So affiliates get access to those classes. Anybody who's interested can also join the medical society. So we have right now it's pay as you go. So it's not like, I think the suggested price is like $2,500 a year, which a lot of our doctors are doing. But the average person doesn't need that level of information. And so them being able to come in and join the webinars and be part of the community and have access to all the doctors on the back end that they can ask questions or interact with. We have some people like paying $20 a month. So it's like, it's very open to anybody. And then I think, we don't right now, which is sort of funny to me, have any locations in Boston, but we have them all over the country. And I think there is a couple that are going to be coming on in Boston that I will be going and working out at as soon as they come to us. But I think, find a Medfix job like box in your area. They're literally we just expanded to Europe and England and Canada. It's like we're growing really fast. We launched 6 months ago for the affiliates and we have over 100. And so I think, finding a place where you can go in and have this higher level of coaching is a true game changer for people.
And what would a workout, what would a workout look like for someone who is interested in looking at this Medifix gym?
Well, so the workouts are, I mean, because of Greg's, history of creating CrossFit, I would say like 90% of our facilities are CrossFit gyms. So they have either been CrossFit or they were, and then or they're both. A lot of people are doing both affiliations. And so that's constantly varied, high intensity functional movements. Now, the ones that we have, so if you're a Medifix gym and you're also a CrossFit gym, you are very good at scaling. You are not entering a class where people are, throwing weights around and no one's teaching you how to do it. And certainly these special populations classes that are smaller are very hands-on. So like we have been selective about picking gyms that we know have the best coaching. So I think like Medifix, again, is just sort of this evolution. And then there's two major national gym chains that I can't talk really openly about yet, but they are also very interested in having sort of like Medifix gyms within their larger facilities. And so again, I mean, I think the difference is really like, these are people who, this is their profession. This isn't a summer job. It's not a thing where they're just like trying to get, work out with hot bodies. Like they're there for health. They're intensely interested in it, and they have done a lot on their own to educate themselves on these issues so that I think they're more closely aligned with healthcare workers than they are with the traditional personal trainer.
Gotcha. So yeah, no, because, for, like you said, if I'm new to exercise, you get that like, am I going to be the weak gazelle in the room?
Embarrassed, right? I mean, I still feel that way, right? I've been like doing this for a long time, and I still feel like if I'm traveling, I'm like, do I really want to like drop in on that place? Like, what's it going to be like? That's stressful.
And then the other one is like, I work out a lot. Like, am I going to be bored? So is this kind of like trying to find that like, ebb and flow. So you're right. Like if you are a good trainer, good coach, you know how to make it so that beginner, feel comfortable. And then who've been working out for decades, feel like, okay, this wasn't a waste of my time. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the intensity piece that we talk about is like, you have to know how hard to push people.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's an element of that comes with experience. And there's an element of that is really people who like, this is their craft.
Yeah.
They can look at you and they can evaluate you pretty quickly, and they can put you through some functional movements and see how your body is moving and where the alignment is and where things are off, and then help you really improve on those functional movements, which allows you to live independently for longer. And adding the intensity piece means like you and I are doing the same workout, but you may be crushing it way more than I am, right? And so like, I think that's really exciting. The gyms that I had were not CrossFit gyms, but we did functional movements. We didn't have barbells because it was like sort of too intimidating for the population that I was working with. But we did a lot of really cool stuff where like we scaled every workout. So it was 4 women at a time.
Right.
And we would have like a bride who was, really trying to get to her like dream body. And then we would have like a 90-year-old woman. And that because the time slots were limited to 4 at a time, we had like waiting lists, right? So like the 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m. classes were always full. And those women wouldn't give up their time slots because they're people, right? And it's like, again, it's like the community aspect of running a gym and seeing how these relationships form was really beautiful, right? Like somebody would get sick with something and the whole gym knew that woman and they would go and bring them food. And really, I think that happens through this notion of working hard together and being vulnerable and having a trusted authority leading you through things that are making you all better. And I think that's really where Medifix is focused. It's this idea of serving your community towards better health as a community. So like whether it's elderly people or kids, everybody's welcome.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think, nowadays, most of us are looking for some form of community, versus having a trainer that's like, yells and like, beat the shit out of them. It's like they want that like all around support.
And I think that's where the common goal of health is so profound. We all want this. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what you do for a job. If you and I are in a partner workout together, we're both rooting for each other, you know, and it makes it fun. And I think, God, we need more of that. We need more of people coming together over things and finding themselves separated and isolated and, just feeling really anxious about the world. I think we all need health. I actually there's a talk I've been giving around the country, and it started mostly talking to our doctors, but now it's going out and talking to like sort of larger communities of people. And one of the points that I make that somebody asked me to give a talk at the Apollo, which I was like, I would love to, because African-American women, I feel like, are really in this sweet spot where the community has been robbed, right? Like you have these food deserts in inner cities and places where it's such an uphill battle to health. But I think that the ability for people in those communities to mobilize together and to make change is nothing new. It's happened over and over again. And I think those communities have been lied to. So they're skeptical. And there's an understanding of like, we need to educate ourselves and we need to know the why more than in other areas. And I just think the ability to drive profound results would be there. But part of the talk that I think I'm going to do for this conference is really looking at, like, we talk about free speech and we talk about freedom of assembly and that we'd all be willing to die for these things. But if you don't have health, none of those things, right? It's like, that's the base of the pyramid. If I'm in a hospital bed and I'm hooked up to all these tubes, I do not care if I can talk freely or not. I can't, because there's a tube in it. So we got to start there. And I think there is something sort of about the way that different communities, especially with the type 2 diabetes rates in African-American communities, had been lied to, and how like SOTA has gone into those communities and sponsored things and given out free products and gotten kids like really into sugar in ways that is so evil. It makes me really think it's sort of a modern slavery. Like there is this notion of like, keep everybody, I mean, the American public in general, but you look at the chronic disease rates in African-American communities and it's tragic. It's preventable, it's reversible, and no one is sharing that education. So I'm pretty revved up about trying to make inroads and help where I can. And again, this isn't about profiting, right? So like our parent company is called Break Even Productions because the goal is to get the education to people. So I've had people say to me like, well, no one's going to be able to like afford to pay you to speak there. And I'm like, I'll fucking speak for free. Like that's not what this is, right? Like it's about how education is the one gift that no one can take away from you, right? You can, money, fame, whatever, it's all very tenuous. Knowing how to think for yourself and knowing how the body works is something that everybody has the right to know. The information is available. We just need to do a better job getting it out to people.
Right. Because it's like, you know better, you do better. Right. So it's like, and you're right. I also feel like I did a road trip in California last year, and it's interesting to see when you're literally in this little small town and there's nothing within 50 miles and the only store you see is a Dollar Tree or Dollar General or something like that.
Yeah.
And, you've gone in those stores and you see what they sell. You couldn't throw a dead fish at anything fresh in that.
Or protein. Yeah.
Anything fresh, and like the only protein you're going to see that says protein just on the label is like beef jerky. Like that's like the closest thing you're going to get to that, or something in a can, maybe tuna. And it's really interesting that, a lot of grocery stores, like they're for profit. And, I'm never going to knock anyone for being for profit, but I also have a little bit of like, you're leaving a whole community with nothing.
Yeah. When I went to Northwestern for grad school and I designed a beat for myself, which was adolescent health. So I spent a lot of time on the south side of Chicago, which is, rough and got its own rules and all kinds of stuff. And I spent a lot of time, there was a pilot program in a middle school, might have been an elementary school, I think it was a middle school, where they had 2 nurses and a doctor. And the pilot program was trying to study, like so many parents are either working hourly jobs. So like if their kid's sick, they have to take the day off of work. It is not conducive to either the kid's health or the parents' health in any way. And so they thought, maybe if we have the medical staff as a part of school, then the sick kids still go to school, parents can still go to work or, do what they need to do. And the kids will be cared for and seen at school. And when I went to, sort of spend the day and see like, how is this going? What the nurse said to me was like, she was like, what's mind blowing to us is that we thought it was going to be things like the flu or whatever. And she's like, I have 3 7-year-olds that need hip replacements because they're so overweight that they have worn out their joints.
Oof.
This was, 25 years ago, right? So I was really at the beginning of my journalism career. And I remember being like, what? Like, how is that possible? And she was like, look at the food that we're serving these kids.
Right.
Like horrible. And then she was like, go on your way back You take the subway back to the nice part of Chicago, try and find a store that has any protein. And so I did. Went into all these like corner stores, and it was like mac and cheese, dried milk was like one of the best things you could find. I mean, it's so oppressive in the access to food that it feels like a crime, right? And I think to your point, like people are trying to make money, and like, the people in those areas don't have money. But it's also like, well, you know what? Like that, I don't accept that. Like we could be turning some of the abandoned buildings, and like there's all these malls that are being turned into greenhouses,
right?
Which is really cool. Like there's a lot of things we could do if we were actually interested in helping that community,
right?
The truth is we're not, right? And that's where I get really fired up, because I think this is where the education can drive real change.
Yeah,
and it allows people to realize like this isn't the only way, right? This is the only way that's been presented to you, but let's do something differently.
But the education could drive change, but also, we all have that community advocate, right? Who's like you said, you see the abandoned building, warehouse, or whatever, and you're like, you're not doing anything with it. How hard could it be for us to make that a greenhouse? Yeah. And when you're ready to do something with it, we'll get out. But it's been abandoned for 15 years. So clearly, you're in no rush to fix the problem.
There is a ton of funding right now for chronic disease, like prevention, reversal, like, regenerative farming. Like, I don't even know all of this, like these areas, but I think it's also sort of just like you get a couple of key people in that community who are like, fuck this, we want change.
Right.
And then you just help them by introducing them to people, or saying like, hey, reach out to this organization because they've got all this money, and you are the perfect candidate to drive the change and to make it happen. So it's not even, I just, in some ways, it's sort of just like matchmaking these different things that are out there that people don't know about.
Yeah.
But they're there.
For sure. So this has been a really, great conversation. And so if you could always Google Medifix to see if there is a facility in your neighborhood or coming soon. But where can people find you on the socials?
Yeah, so also medfix.org is our main site, and there's an interactive map on there. So it's really easy to find if there's one in your area or not. And then the brokenscienceinitiative.org is the bigger entity that has a lot of the research, and you find the medical society there and Medfix. So Medfix sort of redirects over to its own web property, but you can get to it either way. So it's just METFIX.org, which really stands for Metabolic Fix. So it's short for that. And then on social, we're mostly on Instagram. We're trying to get on Twitter, but I think sometimes Twitter makes me feel like it's just angry. People are just so angry. And so I'm lucky that I'm not doing a lot of the social media anymore, so I don't have to deal with that. But I still feel very protective of our team and the people who are in those environments. And it can be just, ugh. So Instagram is sort of more where we're spending our time. We have the Broken Science Initiative is the handle, and Medfix by BSI is the Medfix one. And then I'm News Not Noise on Instagram. And I post more of the women's health stuff. Once the class comes out, we'll have more on Broken Science. But I read a lot of articles and then repost them and sometimes challenge people for getting things wrong. So maybe I'm one of those mean people sometimes, but really in the name of like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. And then, also I think like if people are looking for more resources or information or looking for a speaker or any of those things, just like DM me. I'm also just Emily@brokenscience.org. I'm hugely accessible for people who are in this fight and looking for, ways to collaborate. So feel free to reach out to me directly if there's something that I could be helpful with.
And I ask everyone, what's one thing that makes you feel magical?
Yeah. And I knew this question was coming, and it still feels weird. Like, I'm not sure I feel magical all the time. I think one thing that makes me feel magical is curiosity. Like, I think it's been sort of a guiding principle of mine, and it's never led me wrong. I mean, I've gotten in trouble because I think sometimes my curiosity makes people think that I'm like confrontational or aggressive, which is not the intention. But I think it's always, I think no one should be judged for asking a question. Answers can be problematic, but we really all need to stop trusting surface level opinions, judgments, research. It's like life is about learning and growing. And I think being curious is a really pleasurable thing to be, because you are, I mean, as a reporter, I really love the idea that like every day I kind of did something different, and I was always learning, from anybody at very high levels, at levels of people that I would never interact with in my normal life. Like I really had a very privileged position to be asking questions. And selfishly, that's really wonderful. So I think probably feeling, I'm never really satisfied, but I like the idea of always asking more and digging a little deeper in a meaningful, caring, respectful way, but trying to get a better sense of, who people are and what makes them tick and why do we believe this thing and what is it based on is probably one of my magical traits or qualities or something like that.
I love that. I've asked this question for over 300 episodes and I have yet to get like a duplicate. And
that's interesting.
Yeah. And curiosity is one of my like kind of favorite words because, if you're not curious, it's very easy to just get the wool pulled over your eyes.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, I feel that way like when I give this talk, which we have, I think, on YouTube, I have these crazy slides. And I always say at the beginning of the talk, like, you don't have to read the slides, but they're there because like, I don't want you to trust me. And so like, that's all the backup. That's where I got this from. And so that you take a picture of it or ask me, I'll share them with you and you can go look it up for yourself because you shouldn't trust me and you should challenge me on everything that I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And then you walk away feeling confident because you can now go into all these rabbit holes that I've gone into and realize like, wow, like that she's not, because so many people are just superficially reporting on stuff or read one book and then they think they understand it, but that book was all from one perspective, right? And so, I mean, like, just take women's health. Like we all assumed the men's bodies were the same as ours and turns out they are not at all. And so assumptions are just remarkably flawed.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it Dr. Stacy Sim? She's like, all the research was on small men. And she's like, women are not small men.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I mean, like, it's not like, I mean, the size thing is a big deal, right? Like I say in this talk, like when I had like a teacup Yorkie who isn't with us anymore, but like she would go to the doctor, she was 4 pounds and they would like weigh her and then give her medicine based on how old she is.
Right. And you're like
a 90-pound woman, you're getting the same prescription as a 400-pound man.
Right. Exactly.
Like, in that level of like, what are we doing? But I mean, I think even like take it a step farther. Like women take all these medicines that haven't been tested on us and our hormones dictate so much of how we respond that there's plenty of medications that are routinely prescribed to women that stay in the female cycle or body for 2 times as long. So if it's meant to be like an overnight help you sleep Ambien type thing, men metabolize it. And by the time they wake up in the morning, they're fine. It stays in us for over 24 hours.
Wow.
There's a totally different effect, right? And so the idea that like this hasn't been looked at properly is just egregious. And it's obvious. It's not like these things are super complicated. The other one that I always like to point out, because everybody is on them, are statins.
Yeah.
Women's cholesterol has always been higher. We just run higher. And cholesterol aligns your brain, right? So cholesterol aligns every cell of the body. It's hugely important. The notion that it leads to cardiac problems is not sound. We do not have enough research to say that that is a causal relationship. There may be a corollary relationship, but even that data is all housed away in Oxford. There's a group called the Cholesterol Treatment Trialists, and they worked with all the statin manufacturers and agreed that they would do all the studies. They've never reported on anything negative, right? So you can make your own conclusion about how that worked out. Women who take statins are multiple times, so I don't want to get the number wrong, but I think it's like, you could say 400 times more likely to develop type 2 diabetes on a statin. The number one risk factor for heart disease, which is the leading cause of death for women, is type 2 diabetes. So you go on a statin, it leads to type 2 diabetes. You are actually now at much greater risk for the thing that you took the medication to prevent.
Gotcha.
Right? Most doctors don't even understand this. They don't know this. So they don't sit down and do a risk reward with you as a female patient who's pre-diabetic saying, you know what? Yeah, your cholesterol's a little bit high, but I'm more concerned about your A1C levels.
Right.
So get those lower. Let's see if that helps your cholesterol in some way. And then you won't need this thing that's going to drive the diabetes anyway.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
All of those kinds of things, like it's endless, And so like, I guess it's good that I'm curious because it's like every day there's like a new thing.
No, it is because I feel like, it's like you kind of pull the string and then it's like, one thing leads to another thing that leads to another thing. And it's kind of like, you're always in that chicken egg cycle.
Yeah. Right. Which is part of the reason that the medical society, I think, is so important for people to know about because, doctors don't have time to do this.
No, they don't.
And like we have a whole research team that dives into studies and who's behind them and what the statistical tools were, so that the doctors can go on and listen to those, we call them journal clubs, and say like, holy shit, like I thought this was like a gold standard medication everybody was using. I didn't realize that it had this impact on women. Now I'm going to look at my female patients a little bit differently when I go to prescribe this. And same for patients, because we all have to be our own advocates. We really do not have the luxury of just deferring to authority anymore. And so I think like, anybody who's interested in doing a deeper dive into the medical side of things, the Medical Society is the right spot for that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the time today. This was like, I love this show because I always find out new stuff and I'm always kind of like, oh, wow. But thank you so much. This has been very, very informative. So Magic Makers, you know where to reach out to Emily. Also, if there is a MediFit gym, check it out and see if it's something different. I know that, I asked her the question, like what makes it different than Global Gym? And we all know what happens at Global Gym. So if you're looking for a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more attention to your issues, this might be the place for you to check out. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Magic Makers. I will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Fit Girl Magic podcast. If you've made it this far, yay. I'm thinking you enjoyed the show. Let's continue the conversation on Instagram. You can find me at Kim Jefferson Coach. In order for me to keep sharing this message, do me a favor and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. New episodes are available every Wednesday. The Fit Girl Magic podcast is intended to provide you with tips, tools, and strategies that will help you make better decisions about your health. I really appreciate your feedback and your support. Thank you so much.